Let's take a closer look at this center drawing space and our different viewing options. Harmony can get kind of confusing if you don't understand exactly what you're looking at as you work. I've brought in this scene as an example. You can see on our timeline here that the scene is made up of separate layers. These are called drawing layers. That's what this little icon here means. You can hide or show them with their little eyeball icons. This will help us understand what all of our display options actually show. First, I wanted to quickly note that in any of these views, you can pan around by holding the spacebar and clicking and dragging, and you can zoom in and out with your scroll wheel or by using the zoom in and out shortcut keys. By default, those are the 1 and 2 number keys. So by default, we're looking at the camera view. This represents what your final output is going to look like. If we went to export this video, it would look like this view within this frame. You'll notice that this view has this set of controls along the top and this set along the bottom. Now most of these top controls actually have very specific functions related to other tasks. We'll go over those later as they come up. I want to focus on these ones down here. To do that, I'm going to start by drawing a character into our scene. I'm going to use this button on the timeline to make a new drawing layer, and then make sure I'm actually on it. Then I'll just start drawing. So sometimes it might be hard to see what you're drawing with a background behind it. That's what this first option here is for. This is the light table option. If we turn this on, it will highlight whatever drawing layer you're working on, and ghost out all the others. Keep in mind, these options are all just temporary and don't affect what gets exported. The next option here will display whichever drawing layer you've selected to draw on above all the other layers. These options make it much easier to see what you're drawing and make sure you're working on the right layer. Next, we have the camera mask option. You can see that our actual camera frame is just this rectangle here, but our drawing can go outside this area. Turning on the camera mask lets us see only what's inside the actual camera's frame of view. Next, we have the safe area option. If your animation is ever going to appear on a TV, there's always a risk that the very edges of your screen will get cut off. So make sure everything important is within this smaller rectangle here. This next option here is the bounding box selection style. This is for when you're using this transform tool here. Normally when you're using this, it highlights whatever you have selected in this pink color. If you don't want it to highlight it, but just have the bounding box, you can turn this option on. It really comes down to personal preference and what you're working on exactly. Next, we have the Outline Locked Drawings option. With this option on, any layer you've locked on the timeline with this little lock icon will appear as outlines. Again, this is useful for making sure that you can only see what you're actually working on. And next we have the Reset View option. This just recenters the pan and zoom so that you're looking at the center of the screen again. So if you're zoomed way out or panned off to the side, you can find your center just by hitting this button. Next, this drop-down lets you see or set the zoom level. And next to that, we have a couple important options. You might have noticed that the lines I drew for our character look a little jagged. Well, they only look like that because we're currently looking at the scene in OpenGL mode. OpenGL is a system for rapidly rendering images using your computer's video card. Think of this as a low-resolution preview. If you want to see what your art will actually look like, enable the render view by clicking this blue flower next to the gray one. This is a more accurate image, but it takes longer for the computer to draw, meaning it would be really sluggish to try to draw or animate in render mode. You'll want to stay in OpenGL mode most of the time, and only turn this on to check your art, and check certain special effects, which don't display at all in OpenGL mode. I'm going to quickly delete this back sky layer so I can show you something else. You can see that in render mode, anywhere where there's no artwork in our scene, it adds in a black background. That's because this portion of the image is actually transparent. If you click and hold on this blue flower, you get the option for Matte View. What Matte View does is it shows you just the transparency information of your image. So black is where it's totally transparent, and white is where it's completely opaque. You might want to use this option to check your animations if you're going to be exporting them to another program for compositing. But for the most part, you shouldn't need to use this option very much at all. Next, let's switch to the Drawing tab. The first thing to keep in mind is that the Drawing tab only shows the drawing layer you have selected. But it goes beyond that. Imagine that each of these drawing layers is a separate piece of paper. In the camera view, I can use this tool here to move those pieces of paper around, stretch them, rotate them, do all kinds of stuff. But if I look at them in drawing view, it shows exactly what's on the actual piece of paper without the modifications. This is going to be very useful later on when we start animating our layers. The next few views I want to show you aren't on by default, but if you right-click, we can enable them. I'm going to turn on top, side, and perspective views. So even though Harmony is a 2D animation software, each of your scenes actually exists in a 3D space. If we look at our perspective view, we can see that our artwork is all on a 2D plane. But if I switch to, let's say, the top view and select one of our layers, I can use this tool to move them backwards in 3D space. In fact, let's spread them all out. Then we can see that our scene is really 3D. When you're working with these 3D views, something good to do is click and drag the tab and then move it here along the edge, and then you can actually see two separate palettes and you can see two views side by side. Looking at this in the camera view, you can see that things don't look quite right. Our layers aren't the right sizes. We're going to have a whole video later about how to set up 3D scenes like this and make everything look right. Until then, let's click and drag our camera view back with the others. And then we can just right-click and close these 3D views. So hopefully now we'll be able to keep straight what we're looking at up here on our canvas area. But so far we've only looked at a single image. If we're going to make animations, we'll have to take a closer look at our timeline. Let's do that in our next video.